Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Avon Advisory Plan Commission meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda, they are available on the tables to the right of the audience. We will be conducting business as outlined on the agenda. From time to time, the board may deviate from the agenda. As president of this body, I will inform those in attendance of any deviations. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of that, we request that personal conversations are kept to a minimum and that all cell phones are set to vibrate. Any phone calls should be taken outside of the chambers. If you are interested in commenting during the public hearing portion of the commission's deliberations, please sign up on the sheets located on the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to the staff or the petitioner. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. During the conduct of the public hearing portion of the commission's deliberations, the petitioner will have 10 minutes to present their case to the commission. Remonstrators will have 10 minutes to present objections to the petition. Persons in support of the petition, other than the petitioner, will have 10 minutes to present support for the petition. Finally, the petitioner will close the public hearing portion of the presentation with a 5-minute rebuttal period if they choose. Once the public hearing is closed, no additional testimony will be heard unless it is solicited by members of the commission during the question and answer phase of the commission's deliberations. Subdivision plats and development plan petitions, which is what we are hearing tonight, are ministerial requests, meaning that if the proposal meets the requirements set forth in the town's development ordinances, the Planning Commission must approve the request. In the interest of transparency, state law requires that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing even if the development proposal must be approved. And I also want to say that this evening, right now, we do have a minimum for quorum, which means that all decisions would have to be unanimous. If any petitioners here this evening, we may have another person showing up, but if any petitioners here want to continue their request, their petition to the Planning Commission because of the necessity for unanimous decision, that is a decision you need to announce to us when you come forward. Responses to public comments and questions may be given once the public hearing portion is closed. We understand there may be several persons who wish to speak. In order to keep the meeting running in a timely fashion, we would request that you not repeat previous comments. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. Welcome to the Planning Commission. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ian, shall we take a roll call?
Harold Heider.
Here.
Howard Pope.
One more time.
Robert Pope.
Here. I just said Howard Pope. I'm sorry.
Dave Kaufman. Absent. Mason Pike. Absent. Catherine Ransberg.
Here.
Greg Zuzen.
Here.
Paul Guckenberger. Absent.
Okay. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, we have a quorum.
All right. Move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. Have the members had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes, and are there any comments or edits that are requested?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
I'll second.
Okay.
Harold Heiser.
4.
Robert Pope.
4.
Dave Kaufman is not here. Catherine Ransberg.
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Motion carries.
We're now moving on to the public comments. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on any items that are not on tonight's agenda. If you have something about anything on the agenda, we'll wait to that item. But if you have anything you'd like to speak to that is not on tonight's agenda, this is the time to come forward. Does anybody have any comments they'd like to make? Can you come forward, sir?
My name is Roy Crawford. What else do you need? Address?
I need your name and address, sir.
Okay, name is Roy Crawford. The address is 6283 East County Road, 251 South. And the only comment I've got, some time ago, Avon did a good job on putting the paving in the street down there on 251 South. I got one arrow to throw at it. They got a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit on that. There's not room enough for 2 cars to pass. Plus, we got kids that halfway down the street that's got to walk to school to meet, or walk up the road to meet the school bus. Well, you try to tell everybody that's familiar with the area, what, slow down, go 15 miles an hour, which would be a more appropriate speed limit. Can the speed limit be reduced to 15 from 25, since that's a county road?
Mr. Peoples, who would be the appropriate person to speak to on staff about that matter?
Yeah, I talked to Steve Moore, who's the Public Works Director. I'll go get his card. I'll be right back.
Because
Jared's got you behind you, Bill.
the road is, it's a nice asphalt road, but it's just not wide enough for 2 cars. Thank you very much. Oops.
It'd take an action of the council. The council has to pass,
Well,
the council has to pass,
Okay.
a speed limit is an ordinance,
That
so.
was something that could happen, or maybe, you said it'd be a little statement around it, take an act of Congress to pass it.
Well, no, 15 is kind of low, but it would be up to the council if the council wanted to do
Because
it.
it's just a short, maybe less than a quarter mile. They could get, they might lose a minute if they go 15 versus 25. So that's the only thing I wanted to make now, okay?
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments relating to items not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no further comments, public comments are closed. Do we have any requests for continuances or agenda modifications?
We have one request for a continuance from the staff. That's map P 2214, the manor at Avon primary plat, formerly called the Oaks at Avon. And this is a request for primary plat approval that would subdivide 20.49 acres into 43 lots for a single-family residential development located near 1450 North Avon Avenue. The staff is still working through some issues with the drainage plan on this particular case. And we would like to ask that this petition be continued to the next regular meeting of the Plan Commission in November.
Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion that we table MAP 22-14.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. This will be continued to the November meeting of the Planning Commission. We have no old business. Now we move on to new business. It's your show, Mr. Peoples. Ah.
All right, first up, we have DPR 2218 Satori Shops. This is a request for approval of a development plan. And that is a development plan to allow for the construction of two identical 6,762 square foot retail buildings on two different lots with associated parking, landscaping, access, etc. Some history behind the lot. This takes place in the Satori Point Planned Unit Development, which was originally approved under PUDP 0805 YMCA and PUDF 0806 YMCA. And it does have an extensive land use history associated with the entire subdivision there. In your staff report, I've added just about every variance and rezoning I could find. So this is the property in question here. It's an undeveloped lot just west of the bank there. I think you're all familiar with that. As I said, it's a request for approval of a development plan to allow for the construction of two identical retail buildings with associated parking, landscaping, drive-through, etc. The property is proposed to be divided into two lots under MAPA 2213 Satori Shops to allow for the proposed development, and you'll be hearing that petition here next. The subject properties are located within the Satori Point Planned Unit Development, and they therefore are reviewed by the standards of that PUD ordinance and not our typical unified development ordinance. No waivers have been included as part of this request. They don't even have that mechanism in the PUD, so it makes it a little simpler. And staff does find the proposal to be consistent with the standards of the PUD ordinance. And here is the proposal here. You see the two identical buildings. We have drive-throughs along the west side of each building here, connections, walking connections to the trail around that development, and associated landscaping, parking. Here are the proposed elevations here. No tenants that I'm aware of, so these are just typical signing here. And with that, we find that it meets all the standards of the ordinance, and we recommend approval of DPR 2218 Satori Shops, subject to the following conditions: that any revised plans comply with all commitments and conditions noted as part of any approval granted. A landscape bond is required by Article 6.1 D2 of the Unified Development Ordinance, and this bond be provided to the town of Avon prior to the issuance of a full certificate of occupancy for the subject site. And the development shall comply with all relevant portions of the town code and comments by Public Works, the fire department, and Crossroad engineers at the pre-construction meeting. With that, I'm available for questions.
One question that I have, if you go back to your map, the road, I forget, was it Orange Road up at the
Yes.
top?
Yes,
That's a private road, isn't it?
that's correct.
So how do we get to it? Who's gonna maintain it?
There is an easement there, would be maintained by the property owner.
Do they know that?
I'm sure they know that, yes. But that would be a question for them.
Okay.
Any further questions from staff?
Dan, that's actually a question for you. Can you remind us what our duties are for DPR? What our goals are for DPR?
Yeah, DPR, you're looking for compliance with the applicable ordinances. So that would include the PUD ordinance, Satori Point here. And your job is to provide oversight. The staff has determined that the submitted plans are in compliance. And so your job is to make sure you agree with that. And if so, then you must approve.
Thank you. We'll have the petitioner come forward.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Lindley with Banning Engineering, 853 Columbia Road in Plainfield. Also with me tonight is the petitioner, Jesse Pullman with William Trace Development. So Ian did a spectacular job of describing the project. There's 2 small retail buildings on the last remaining property in Satori Point. It's pretty basic. We've complied with the parking requirements, landscape requirements, and drainage after Crossroads review. To answer your question, sir, the covenants and restrictions for the plat, Satori Point has a almost like a homeowners association that Y takes care of. So just like the rest of the streets within the development, they will be taken care of by the whole group, all the property owners, and the Y would be the head of it. There's also a plat amendment involved. It's the next case, but here to answer any questions you might have with the project.
So this is the last piece of Satori Point.
Yes.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, what kind of businesses do you anticipate being in those buildings?
This is a spec building at this point. I don't believe they have any tenants as of yet. But hopefully once it gets up, people see it and tenants will come.
Maybe a different way to ask that. Are there any restrictions on the PUD zoning inside that location to what businesses might be able to go in there? Are there any restrictions on the type of business that may be going in there that's written into the PUD?
Yeah, there is a permitted use table associated with the PUD. We review this under just general retail, which is an approved use there. Should we have to, we would look further into more specific uses once a tenant moves in.
Yeah,
You hit
we
the
would
right phrase
confirm
that I
the
was looking
land
for.
use at the time of permit issuance. So when a building permit is applied for, we would confirm that the proposed land use is consistent with the permitted use table in the planned unit development ordinance. However, general retail would be a permitted use in the district, so that's what we presume is going to be there until we get an actual tenant.
Thank you.
Well, those were kind of my questions as well. Realizing this is a spec building and I see the sign up front says coming in 2023. I understand this is just a concept. My concern is when you show your concept with a drive-through window could either be a bank, it could be a fast food, and those are all permitted uses. But I look up and down 36, we have enough things that are permitted uses. We don't need any more of those. So I don't know if you would be willing to, make those non-permitted uses as we go through this.
Good evening. For the record, Jesse Pullman with William Trace Development, address 510 East State Road 32, Westfield. Appreciate you considering our development plan this evening. Kind of stepping back, question about permitted uses. The PUD obviously sets forth those permitted uses, but there's also some pretty restrictive language by Hendricks Health and the covenants and restrictions, obviously wanting to ensure that there's a certain level of use that's there, and then uses that aren't either competing or conflicting with their intended health-oriented uses. And I say that because we've not signed a lease with anybody yet, but there is a dental group that we're talking to that potentially could take a good portion of that eastern building, and we're working with the declarant for the covenants and restrictions to amend those to allow that use so it doesn't fall under one of their prohibited health uses that might compete with what the Y is offering.
So
As
do we know what those are? We haven't seen a copy of what the hospital is restricting.
I'll defer to the staff. Typically, on the covenants and restrictions are enforced by the declarant as the master developer for that, and they tend to be more onerous than what the community's PUD standards might be. And usually they're serving the intent of what the master developer has for that site, that they're restricting at that private level, but not necessarily wanting the government to prohibit in the land use side of it. Our vision for the property, given where it's at, is pretty standard general business or general office is what we anticipate, whether it's service related, restaurant related. It's, as we looked at what we saw through COVID, the drive-through portion, whether it be something that's a restaurant or, as you mentioned, a financial institution, was pretty critical. And so our design to have the two drive-throughs was intentional based on the uses that we know are interested in the property. So from that perspective, I guess to directly answer the question earlier, we're not interested in further restricting the uses that are there. But part as an investment, the more restrictions we put on it, the harder it makes it for us to lease it up when we're already competing with financial constraints with the current market.
And I appreciate that, but we're also here and we live here and we see this every day and we have traffic up and down 36 and we get questioned from our constituents. So I think it's a good reason to ask the question.
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking.
So.
Any further questions from the board, commission? Okay, with that, we will open it up to public comments. Is there anybody who would like to speak on this particular agenda item? Anybody present who would like to speak on this agenda item? Okay, with that, we're closing public comments for this agenda item. Discussion.
Here, I think we're seeing the firsthand problem with, it's one of the problems with PUDs, as Mr. Taylor mentioned earlier. As long as this meets the spirit of the ordinance and the PUD is its own zoning ordinance, we don't have a lot of control that we can limit this. So with that being said, it meets our staff's view of that underlying ordinance. Administratively, I think the word that he used was must. So as far as I'm concerned, this meets those and we've got to approve this thing.
The question will come is if another chicken place decides to go in there. So, that could be contentious.
It could be, but we don't have the authority to stand in that way.
That's true.
That's the market at work there.
Chicken forever.
They could call it the chicken coop, I guess. So Dan, just to clarify this, because that's my concern, my reservation is I can't change anything. It's already under the PUD. Like I said, I don't want to see other banks and I don't want to see other fast food coming through. So can we approve it with those conditions or not?
No, those are rezone questions. So when the PUDs come in or the rezones come in, that's when you can deal with use. Of course, if the land is already zoned in a manner which would allow that, you have no say at all in how that develops. And so in this particular case, the PUD, and that's an old PUD, when that PUD was done, it was really broad, trying to spur not only the YMCA, but development around it with heavy commercial in the front, as you remember. So at that time, the sentiment was that, 36 looked different when it was approved. But so I suppose, just lesson learned, clearly and seriously vetting PUD ordinances on the use table is the way to deal with that issue. In this case, I think you have no latitude at all.
And this is the last piece of Satori Point.
Yeah.
So this is kind of grandfathered.
So Mr. Peoples, then the comment was made that there are some HRH self-imposed restrictions. Do we know what those are?
No, we don't. We don't keep copies of the private covenants that they We review the covenants initially during, say, a plating, just to make sure that, we're not tasked with enforcing them, quite honestly, but we don't keep copies of them. It's a private contract between all the property owners within that development, and we don't get involved in enforcing or administering those covenants.
Well, I know that project's been there for a long time, and they've been through the market crash. And so they had to change their model and the way they did things. So I guess I just want to say we can't impose those, but I would ask the developer to strongly consider not including those in your development. That's all I can say. So.
Any further discussion?
Willing to accept a motion? I move that we approve DPR 22-18 Satori Shops Development Plan subject to the following conditions. 1, any revised plans must comply with all commitments and conditions noted as part of any approval granted. Number 2, a landscape bond is required per section 6.1 of the UDO. This bond must be provided to the town of Avon prior to issuance of a full COA for the subject site. Number 3, the development shall comply with all relevant portions of town code and comments by Public Works, the fire department, and Crossroads engineers at the pre-construction meeting.
Do we have a second?
I will second that motion.
Harold Iser,
4.
Robert Bosch,
4.
Dave Goffner. Not here. Mike, Catherine Rander,
4.
Greg Newsom.
4.
Okay. Move on to our next item, Satori Shops Plat Amendment.
All right, we got MAPA 2213, Satori Shops. This is a request for approval of the plat amendment that would provide Satori Point Block B to 2 lots. Currently, Block B contains approximately 3.13 acres, and it sits vacant. And the revised plat would divide that block into 2 separate lots, 2 and 3, equaling 1.324 and 1.804 acres. As I said before, with the previous petition, this is the Satori Point Plan Unit Development that was approved back in 2008, and it has an extensive land use history. This is the lot that we saw before. And again, it is a request to subdivide into 2 lots in order to facilitate their development, as you just approved. Again, there are no waivers associated with this plat request, and we do find the proposal meets all the standards of the Satori Point PUD ordinance. This is the proposal here, subdivided lots. Again, you saw this previously. As you can see, there is that access easement up to the north there. We do recommend approval of this plat amendment, MAPA 2213 Satori Shops, subject to no conditions, and I'm available for questions.
And just to state the obvious, this is obviously for the previous, related to the previous
Correct.
petition.
Same question back to you, Mr. Taylor. It's not a DPR. This one's a plat. Would you mind telling us the rules on what we need to consider here?
Yeah, same thing with the plat. You're looking to make sure that the lots as drawn and submitted meet the requirements of subdivision of land in your ordinance. And so the staff reviewed lot sizes, access to entry, and the other requirements, setbacks and whatnot, to make sure that they're all properly shown on the plat. Of course, they're also consistent with the DPR you just saw, as Catherine said, but your job is to review just for compliance. And if you find compliance, it's ministerial approval, which means you must approve.
And for those people who are especially nerdy about municipal code, you can find out more at Indiana Code 36-7-4702.
So to make a quick question, Mr. Peoples, this is in compliance, correct?
It is.
Perfect.
Do we have any further questions for staff?
Motion?
Like the petitioner to come forward?
Oh, apologies. I'm council rule. Sorry. Trying to jump ahead.
Have the petitioner come forward?
You just wanted me to get up again. Again, Ryan Lindley with Banning Engineering. Yes, this is just the final period to the sentence here, actually creating the lots for the two building sites. This was formerly a block, and that is exactly what the PUD was set up to do. Staff advised us to do a plat amendment to create the lots, and here we are. Happy to answer any questions.
I don't know, did you state your name and address prior to the beginning?
Yeah, Ryan Lindley, Banning Engineering, 853 Columbia Road.
Okay,
Plainfield.
thank you. I wasn't sure I heard that. And was this, was the original plan to have two lots here?
Yes, when the PUD was created, there was a maximum number of lots for the development as a whole. And it's being the final two as well under the maximum that the PUD set forth.
I do have a question. Is there a zero lot line on the east and west boundaries of the two buildings?
That is correct. Yeah, they share the same.
So that'll all be rectified because we're having a hearing after this where we're trying to create an existing center that wants to parcel it off and it'll have a zero lot line right through the middle.
I mean,
of it.
we have the setbacks, the required setbacks, but
Thank you.
Any further questions for the petitioner? If not, we'll go ahead and open this up to public hearing. Is there anybody who would like to speak as to this particular agenda item? Is there anybody present who would like to speak as to this agenda item? If not, I declare public comments for this agenda item closed. Discussion. I mean, this is pretty straightforward. It's just,
I'm afraid because I jumped ahead already.
this obviously dovetails easily with the previous petition, and staff has informed us that it is in compliance. And this being a ministerial decision, I think there's probably not a lot of discussion to be had. Mr. Zuzan, any questions? Or any comments?
I'll make a motion to approve MAPA 22-13 Satori Point, or I'm sorry, Satori Shops as presented.
Second?
I'll second. Four.
4.
4.
Next agenda item. Beechwood Center plat amendment.
Map P 2215 Beechwood Center Plat Amendment. This is a request for approval of a plat amendment to re-subdivide 14.68 acres into two lots for commercial redevelopment. It's a 14.6 acre property zoned C2 located in tiers 2 and 3 of the US Highway 36 Overlay District and is located near the address of 7508 Beechwood Center Road. History on this one is the Beechwood Center, which is a retail complex there that has Rural King, Emmy's, a couple other land uses in it, was platted, recorded on August 27th, 1997 under instrument number 9700017870. And last week, the Board of Zoning Appeals heard and approved a variance of development standards to establish a lot line along the party wall of this subdivision with a 0-foot setback when the ordinance requires a 10-foot setback. This is the property located here, right here. It consists of two lots, a small lot right here, a larger lot right here. There is, if you remember from about 2 months ago, a development plan approval petition pending on this particular lot. It has been continued several times because the property owner has been working through the process to purchase a portion of this shopping center. Currently, the area is divided into 2 lots, as I said, a 12-acre approximately and about a 1.7-acre lot. The revised plat would retain the 2-lot count, but then create one of those lots at 9.38 acres and the other one at 4.39 acres. This would result in a lot line along a party wall in the existing shopping center. And as I indicated, the Board of Zoning Appeals heard and approved a variance of the setback last week to permit that lot line to be platted in between those 2 buildings. What would ultimately, this exhibit here shows you the existing lot line essentially in blue, and then the red lot line on it showing you how the new lot would be created right here in between these 2 tenant spaces. My belief is that this is an old for-profit college, and then this right here is Emmy's. And so back here, this would be the new lot that would incorporate all of this property right here. This would allow the petitioner to amend the site development plan that's currently on file and to create an addition off of this side. Currently, the site development plan did have a 10-foot setback from this property line. And what they would like to do once they've created this lot is do a straight-up addition off of that existing shopping center. This is a picture of the new subdivision. We do recommend approval. It meets all the standards of the C2 district and tiers 2 and 3 of the US Highway 36 overlay district that apply to platting. And we do recommend that it be approved. We have no conditions on this one. The details associated with this will be handled during the development plan review petition. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Can you go back, Jared, to the picture that you had there with the red line? We had Chick-fil-A a couple weeks ago, and they're going to use part of this parking lot for some of their off-site parking. Is that correct?
They are, yeah. Right down here.
Right.
They'll tear down that bank and then they'll build a new Chick-fil-A on that property. Now, what they will do is they will use approximately 25 to 28 parking spaces in this parking lot for their employees. And then they will reserve the approximately 50 parking spaces they have on site for their customers.
So what party then would they have that agreement with? For lack of a better word, is it Rural King
It is.
or is
yeah,
it
it's-
Emmy's?
It's Rural King. Rural King will own those parking
So
spaces
it would have
before
to
and
be
after.
west of the red line.
Yeah.
So would it preclude Emmy's or Rural King to put a fence up where that red line is? To keep people from coming into their parking spaces? Or do they need a permit and permission from us to do that? I mean, it's almost like I don't want to create a spite strip. Someone gets mad at somebody and boom, they put a fence up.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It should be noted, however, when this development was done, that the undeveloped lot does have parking on it for the whole shopping center. And so they already have sort of placed parking on an adjoining property there. So they're just basically shifting that lot line. Could someone put up a fence? You know, I'd like to say no, but the answer is yes, they could. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in a couple of shopping centers in Greenwood where someone acquired property through a tax sale and then fenced off the site. I don't think that's what I think it was more of a way to extract money from tenants in that particular case. And I don't think that's going to be the issue with this particular lot because they do have shared parking here for the whole shopping center.
But that's not really something that we are involved in.
Not during plating. We could look at it from when the DPR is brought in, but I'm not exactly certain if we could preclude them from fencing off their parking unless they need it, which is what we would do during the DPR process. We would look at the parking for the individual land uses on both sides of the lot line and make sure that they have the appropriate number of parking spaces for the land uses that are either currently there or for the purposes of the vacant tenant space, general retail, which I think is 3.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet.
I mean, I'm fine with what they want to do. That's just my concern is we don't have any control over it. They can come back and do it. And now we have issues.
Yeah, they could. They could do it. I think that these two property owners currently have a pretty good working relationship. They're buying the property from each other, but
They have a good marriage now.
yeah.
We'll see
It-
what
it-
happens
it-
when they get divorced later.
Well, it could go south, I suppose.
But if there's no fence shown in the DPR that's approved, to put a fence up, I believe they'd have to come back to us, just like if they wanted to eliminate or change their traffic flow. Their development plan is locked in by you guys. And so I know we had one instance like this years ago, and we told the person that they couldn't block off the other parking area because that was part of their approval, their original approval. And that was the end of that. So.
Discussion? Okay, there's no further questions for staff. We'll ask the petitioner to come forward.
Good evening. Brady Kuhn with Kuhn and Gustafson Land Surveying, offices at 410 West Oak Street, Zionsville, Indiana. Mr. Peoples described the project in great detail, and I would agree with everything that he said. This simply is to adjust what is an existing lot line between these two entities to the west and provide for a larger lot for the owner to the east. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
So how is the marriage?
It's good as far as I'm aware. I just spoke with I guess it's AJM LLC Avon, which is a Rural King entity who is selling the land. And I know they've been talking for months with the owner of the Pancake House to the east. And they are certainly working cooperatively to, I think, solve some problems for the Pancake House as much as anything. And by problems, I mean space, more space for the business, a better facility.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, with that, we'll open it up to public hearing. Is there anybody signed up to comment on this agenda item?
Sorry.
Okay. Anybody else who'd like to speak on this agenda item? Yes, ma'am.
I don't want to speak on it, but I was having trouble reading your map. Can you tell me in layman's terms, what property are you talking about? Is it?
If you're going to ask a question, please come to the podium, ma'am. And give your name and address.
Hi, Vanessa Smith, 7648 Buttercup Court, Avon, Indiana. I'm just trying to figure out, where's 36 on your map?
Oh, it's not on the map. It's just off the map. So these are our, that's a bank and there's a Dairy Queen and other
Okay.
sorts of things. And they're down
Right.
here and 36 is like right here.
Okay.
And then this right here, there's Rural King and there's
Right.
Emmys and then there's a vacant tenant space there. And I
Right.
think a softball throwing facility.
And so are you talking about expanding the building?
They are eventually going to expand the building. They're just trying to shift the lot line right here
Oh.
from here to here so they can own this part of the property and then expand it over here.
But not back there where Beechwood Farm, where the homes are?
Right here?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. All right, thank you. I just was curious. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions from the public regarding this agenda item? If not, let's open it up to discussion. Public hearing closed for this agenda item.
I don't need to ask this one, Dan. We kind of had this in the last one. This one's for Bill. I think you already stated it, but I'll make sure the question's asked. Does this meet our zoning ordinances
Yeah,
for this?
it meets all the
major plot
standards of
limit?
the C2 zoning district and the Tier 2 and Tier 3 standards of the US 36 overlay district as they relate to plating. We'll get into the details of the others when we get the development plan review petition, or we re-review the development plan review petition at a future date.
I don't see anything, we haven't been shown anything that makes me disagree. I agree.
The only issue had to do with the 0-foot setback, and that's already been resolved.
Yes, the setback was the only issue, but the Board of Zoning Appeals approved a variance on that, so it's consistent with the requirements of the ordinance as amended by a variance by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay. And because this is a ministerial decision, if it meets all the requirements, then we have the obligation to approve, correct? Okay. Any further discussion? Do I hear a motion?
If nothing else, I will move that we approve map P 22-16 Countryside Estates preliminary plat, request for approval of a major subdivision primary plat to develop a single-family residential community containing 60 lots on 36.6 acres.
It'd be a different motion.
This is the one you want.
Sorry about
That's the
that.
next one.
Okay.
Rewind.
I move that we approve map A 22-15 Beechwood Center Block A plat amendment, a request for approval major subdivision plat amendment, re-subdividing Block A into 2 lots.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Bill Nyman,
4.
Robert Toth,
4.
Captain Ranford,
4.
Craig Susan,
4.
motion carries.
3 out of 5. We're getting through this. Our next agenda item, Countryside Estates primary plat.
Map P 2216 Countryside Estates primary plat. This is a request for approval of a primary plat to subdivide 38.6 acres into 60 lots for a single-family residential development with a waiver of section 721J of the Unified Development Ordinance that would allow the subdivision of 60 lots with 1 access point to a perimeter street. For anything above 49 lots, 2 access points are required. This property is located near 7900 East County Road 100 North and is zoned R2. This is a map of the property. It's it's actually owned by Kingsway Church or an entity associated with Kingsway Church. And it's located immediately to the west of it right here. It's got single-family residential to the south, and to the west, it's got a special use, which is a church to the east, and then it's got single-family residential to the north. As I indicated before, this is a request for initial subdivision approval, subdividing this 38 acres into about 60 lots. The request that does include a waiver of the section 721J of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow for a subdivision of 60 lots with 1 access point to the street system. The property itself doesn't have sufficient street frontage to the perimeter street system to safely accommodate a second means of ingress and egress to the site. Normally, in this particular case, what we have in the ordinance is they need to have a minimum separation of 1,200 feet in between access points if they're going to get access to the same street, or they need to have access to 2 separate streets. They do not have access to 2 separate streets, and the separation standard or the width of the lot along 100 North there is just too narrow to accommodate 2 access points. So we do recommend approval of that waiver request. The site has been reviewed by the staff, and it's been reviewed by our technical advisory committee. The proposed lots are in the revised plans are all consistent with the minimum requirements of the zoning ordinance. This particular subdivision request is using basically your base architectural standards. So we have no elevations or no building plans associated with the houses that may or may not be constructed on this site, and they weren't reviewed as part of this process. If the waiver is approved, the proposed plan is consistent with all the standards of the Unified Development Ordinance. This shows the general layout of the lots, the one access point right here. That access point was intentionally placed, the center line of this access point was intentionally placed along the center line of the access point to the subdivision to the north, to deconflict offset intersections at this location. There will be, and this will be more hashed out further during the construction plans, but there'll be some improvements probably at this entrance point to make this as safe as we can possibly make it. There's additionally a stub street to the property to the east, right down here. And that would allow for a future connection should this property be redeveloped from the church that it currently is into some other land use. And we could extend that access point out to another perimeter street. We do recommend approval of the requested waiver. We do recommend approval of map P 2216 Countryside Estates preliminary plat with the 3 standard conditions shown above. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Question I have is, so really the only thing that they're requesting that we act on is the waiver. It's already zoned R2, that what we want there. But you mentioned in your comments, the architectural standards are base, they're doing a minimum.
Right, they're doing the base architectural standards in the ordinance.
So what does base translate into? I'm assuming these people here are from Forest Commons. They want to know what the appraised value of those homes are compared to the appraised value of their homes.
We don't look at value when we review subdivision requests. And we don't look at value whether we review the enhanced architectural standards or the base architectural standards. We have a checklist in the ordinance that specifies what those base standards are. There is a requirement on homes exceeding 1 story that the front facade have 4 windows, side facades have at least 2 windows, rear facades have 4 windows. Masonry wrap would be required on all the homes. There's an 11-inch overhang minimum required. There'll be some building articulation required, and that the window have decorative trim of wood or composite, at least 3.5 inches wide around all the windows. And then corner lots have side elevations facing the street that have architectural detailing similar to a front facade. And then there's some anti-monotony standards. These would all be reviewed and confirmed during the permitting process when the petitioner, after they've recorded the plat, installed the infrastructure, and they're ready to build homes in it. But we don't have any idea what the value of those homes may or may not be.
Second question I have is, they're asking for the waiver because there's 60 lots. You had shown a slide up there earlier. If it was 49 or less, they wouldn't be asking for a waiver?
No, they wouldn't have to. If it's 49 or less, one access point to the perimeter street system is permitted by right.
Well, the step street that we're putting in to go to the east, I was over there today, and it has to go through a dry retention pond. So there's no way you can get it across the Kingsway property. And if you looked at your map, it'd probably go right through their parking lot, which I'm assuming they would not give us right of way or an easement to cut through their parking lot, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, it would go somewhere in the neighborhood, like right here through here, and you're right.
Lot line is, that's a gravel road right now. That's the easement for the homeowner that lives to the south. to get
Right.
to the property.
Right here, there's a homeowner that lives in this area right here, and this is their driveway.
And right below Avon, there's a little tree line and that dry retention. If that stub road came out, where would it go?
You mentioned in your comments that one section of the ordinances implies that developments between 49 and 74 lots, which this is, may utilize a boulevard entrance to count towards a second means of ingress. Can you explain what a boulevard entrance is?
Sure,
'Cause
there's
it looks
a,
like that's what they're proposing.
yeah, and the standards of the ordinance, so it's an interesting quirk. The ordinance doesn't specifically state that you can substitute a boulevard entrance for a second means of ingress and egress. And by a boulevard entrance, I mean an entrance that is usually, or actually by ordinance, it's required to be cut in half with a landscape island. And so you usually will have a 15-foot lane on one side of that, a 15-foot lane on another side, and about a 10-foot landscape island. The idea behind this requirement is that if one entrance to the subdivision is cut off, that emergency vehicles have a second way to get into and out of the subdivision. That's the whole point of having this. And so that was why with a boulevard entrance, if you cut off one half of the boulevard entrance, emergency vehicles still can get in and out of the second half of the boulevard entrance. Now the ordinance specifies that if you are over 75 lots, you must install a boulevard entrance. That's what the ordinance says, but it specifies that smaller developments, and those are smaller developments between 49 and 75, may install a boulevard entrance. And it's implied in the ordinance that boulevard entrance could substitute for a second means of ingress and egress, but it's not overtly stated that that's in fact the case.
Because by definition, a boulevard entrance would be wider than a single entrance because you have to have room for 2 lanes plus the landscape island, correct?
Yeah, it would be a wider entrance. Some of them, it could be 1 lane. I mean, it could be 1 lane. In most cases, you're going to put some sort of turn lane and some sort of through lane in, or through and right turn lane. Those details we usually get involved with at the secondary plat phase when construction plans are drafted. We don't really get to that level of detail in primary plat.
Bill, got a question. Would it be safe to say the intent of that limitation, according to what you just told me, is really a public safety issue?
It is, yeah. It's really a way to get make sure that emergency vehicles aren't precluded from making a run into the subdivision by having some sort of catastrophe at the main entrance and have no way to get through. I mean, to be honest with you, emergency personnel will find a way through. They always do, but
We hope so.
we want to make it easy on them.
And is there
Cheap
any
treason.
time limit for this eastern side where that stub street is proposed that would complete this second entrance and sort of remove that public safety issue off the table? Is there any time limit on when we can guarantee that would be complete?
No,
So
not
this
really.
time, we're sort of opening the door for a public safety issue to be present till whenever.
It's possible, yeah. I mean, we mitigate it somewhat by creating a boulevard entrance at the entry point. But it's possible that you could have a subdivision of 60 lots and frankly, not get a stub street connected for years, decades even. I mean, I've had stub streets that were platted in the 70s and the 80s, and they were never connected. I mean, usually the biggest problem with stub streets is if it happens 10 years down the road, people don't want them connected. That's usually the problem that you really got. You try connecting them and people go nuts.
We would not add a condition at this point, correct, Dan? To make sure, to say that it has to be a boulevard entrance?
Well, it meets the threshold. Well, it doesn't necessarily, we could. I mean, you could put because that directly relates to your waiver. I see no reason why you couldn't do that.
You could impose that condition on a waiver approval. Waiver approval is discretionary. And so you could impose a condition on that and say that there must be a boulevard entrance that complies with our ordinance. This is a little tricky case in that if the developer submitted a plat with 2 entrances, what I think Bill was trying to talk about earlier is that our Public Works Department might not approve that because they're too close together. And so, the developer finds himself in a position where the town would say, we don't like lots of curb cuts and we don't think it's safe if they're too close together. So we kind of drive them to the one point of access anyway. I do like your idea about making the boulevard entrance a condition, however, because that's really a good solution for this situation.
Right.
But I think it's worth noting that what we have before you is an access point that aligns to the development to the north, which is great, eliminating conflicting turning movements. But in general, you all have been here long enough to know that in general, we would on 100 North or 100 South or 200 North or 200 South, we would like fewer curb cuts, not more. And so, but also the closer they are together, the more difficult it is to design safe entry and exit from both, because now they've got traffic diving into the next access point while they're trying to get back out in traffic. That's the problem with them if they're too close.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? If not, we will hear from the petitioner.
Good evening, Lance Farrell, Banning Engineering, 853 Columbia Road in Plainfield, Indiana. Here tonight, I agree with Bill, did an outstanding job of describing everything, so I don't want to really go back through all that. 38 acres, 60 lots, which is well underneath the requirement. It is already zoned R2. One thing that Bill didn't mention was the fact that there's an 8% open space requirement. And with this development, we're not going to touch all of the woods to the south. So we actually have a 36.9%. I guess I should have said something that I do have Courtney and Joel from Ryan Homes here to answer any other questions pertaining to that. The reason for the waiver is exactly what everybody said. I think I can honestly say right now that we will do a boulevard. If you make that a condition, we've designed it kind of as that boulevard. We've met with the fire people to see if get their apparatus size so we can get the turning lanes and the radius is all. We actually talked with the bus people as well and got the locations that they would have school pickups of. So we've kind of done our homework on that part of it. We've been through TAC. I think we've addressed everything that was a TAC, other than the fact that with the stuff that we would become down further, as Bill had mentioned, when you get into that design type of stuff. I know Greg had a comment on something, and we'll get to that part when we actually get to the design part in the second phase of this. The comment about the stub road going down to into the dry detention area, that is something we have looked at. There's 12 acres there that is still, the Kingsway has not decided if they want to do something with it, what they want to do with it. We have done layouts for them, layouts also for the client, and we would reconfigure that. And that road obviously wouldn't go straight. It would tie into what they have. So there's some plans there. Nothing's official. We don't know if they're going to go through with it or whatever, but that's there. One of the other things too, that it was kind of interesting is that is an ingress egress easement, like you said, to the neighbors to the south or whatever. Sitting here thinking that could be an access to be used in that case that there isn't a catastrophe or whatever, that is a gravel road that goes down through there that we could utilize in an emergency situation, in my opinion. That's all I have. Anybody have anything for me? We'll wait.
Question I have regarding the boulevard then, will the boulevard going out of the subdivision have a eastbound and a westbound lane?
We'll make it wide enough to do a left turn and a right turn. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Did we have any further questions for the petitioner? I do have a question. If you could step forward again.
Sorry.
Okay.
Not too early.
So you heard the conversation we had about there being a boulevard entrance. So you have proposed putting in a boulevard entrance there, correct? So there won't be any objections to us making it a condition?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
It'll match like what Forest Commons is.
Okay, thank you. If we're done with questions for the petitioner, we'll open it up to public comment with regards to this agenda item. Has anybody signed up to speak as to this agenda item?
Yes, we have a Barbara Kilborn.
Okay, you want to step forward?
I'm the person that lives just south of the driveway. Um, I have documents here that show that I have a permanent easement to keep my driveway. And I was looking at some of the plans and it looked like there was some kind of exit coming out the south end that was going to use my driveway. So is that still in the works?
Pardon me, ma'am, for the record, would you state your
Oh, I'm
name and
sorry.
address?
My name's
Thank
Barbara
you.
Kilborn, and I live at 7701 East County Road, 100 North, which is basically that gravel drive. That's my house there.
So this, I believe she lives in this property right here, and along the east or western edge of the current Kingsway Church property, there's a gravel drive that extends from her lot all the way out here to 100 North.
Right.
And she has a map, or she has a recorded easement, and the recorded easement is shown on the plat. It's not on this particular property, but it's on the adjacent property. We would require the installation of a hammerhead turnaround, and you see that in the documents that you provide. So there's a stub street that stubs right into the property, and there'll be a short length of her currently gravel driveway that would be made into probably concrete to allow a vehicle to do a turnaround. I didn't put it on there. But that's the only improvement to her, or the only deviation from her driveway. I don't think we're asking that the driveway be removed. It's just right around here, we'd put a little hammerhead turnaround so that a car could turn around and then come back.
Okay. So does that mean the people that live in the neighborhood would use my driveway to get out of their neighborhood?
They could. I mean, we wouldn't have it blocked off.
Okay.
That would be if that stub street is developed, correct?
Yeah, when the stub street is developed, it would stub right into that gravel driveway. And then the gravel, and then like I said, we put a hammerhead at the end of that. So for turnaround purposes, and theoretically, I guess someone could drive on that driveway, although if anybody's going to, it'll probably be just these two people right here.
Okay.
You know, using common sense anyway, these two people right here would be the only ones, or everyone else would just use this
Could we
access.
please keep conversation take your conversations outside, please?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why anybody would choose a gravel drive with chuck holes in it. So that I was told that I was gonna have to drive through the neighborhood to get out of my house. And I really, really, really want to keep my driveway. So,
Yeah, we're not, this request wouldn't eliminate that easement. So it's just she could keep her driveway.
good.
I mean,
Well, you bring up a good point, though. She wants to make certain she can get in and out of her house using her driveway where she has an easement. And now we're also saying that if we create that stub road with an entry point, usually if you're going to do a stub road, it's closed. You can't get in or out unless, so now they're going to use her driveway to get access to whatever lots into that subdivision. To me, that doesn't sound right.
So this is the time for public comment, and if this issue comes up, obviously it'll come back before the hearing. But my understanding is that this will not remove your easement. You will still have your driveway, and should the stub road be developed, then you should absolutely come here and be part of that conversation.
So they'll let me know.
what's that?
They'll let me know if they decide to do that. Build the stub road or whatever.
Well, the stub road is part of the approval of this petition. This stub street right here.
Okay. Okay, I don't understand what it's for, though.
To connect at a future date. So if this were to redevelop out right here, then this would allow us to connect through to the public north-south street right there.
Okay. I'm not
Build
sure.
build a new street through there.
Okay. Also, I have a picture of my front yard completely underwater, and then my driveway and the whole ditch area completely, like 5 times its width underwater. So I just want to make sure that they're not going to fill in the ditch that goes through the road at the south there.
Access point,
I know, I'll show you.
there's an area right in here. It has ditches. Oh, yeah. So this shows the property.
Oh, boy.
A lot of water.
And that's after a heavy rain. Obviously, it's not like that right now, but it really floods badly.
I would love to see that picture.
Did you have anything else to say, ma'am?
No, just making sure I can get out my driveway and making sure that the drainage still will go under my driveway through that area.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this agenda item?
I got a Paul Albrecht, no case number there. Paul? Okay.
22-02. Is that what this is? Oh, no, that's the next.
That's the next
Okay,
case.
that's the next one.
You want? That's the next one.
Okay,
It's not this case.
It's not this case, it's the next case. So
Did I see a hand raised? Was there somebody present who'd like to
I could-
speak as to this?
got more here.
Oh, we've got one more person?
Joel is with the petitioner, I believe. Kurt Wilt and Ryan Huey? Nope.
Did somebody else sign up to speak on this agenda item? Sir, you want to step forward?
Apologize. First time I've ever done anything like this. Just got some questions, really. My name is Dave Gettner. I live at 7531 East County Road 100 North. Some of the questions I have, and I heard him say that they don't look at value. All these houses are under a quarter acre property lines and stuff like that. So I was wondering if the county has any opportunity to look at the value of the markets like that for the property values of the north, west, and south. Since you guys don't look at value and just going to build houses. So would that, if these are smaller houses, low income houses, wouldn't that devalue the property to the north?
That I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on the market mechanisms out here.
Okay, next question I have, if you've ever been up in 100 North and stuff like that, there's the ball fields there, which are church owned and, it's going to be turned into a neighborhood. Has Avon County looked into another place, an alternative place where those kids will play sports at? Because my son plays sports there.
That's not the purpose of this commission.
Okay, well, how about road traffic on 100 North? If you ever drive up in 100 North, my son walks to school, it's like that. It's already heavy traffic. It's, pretty narrow. If you're going to build another 61 houses there and induce more traffic on that road, what is the timeline, stuff like that, to either widen a road, if that's going to cut into our individual properties, stuff like that, or make it more accommodated, because you have 3 schools there. You got, north, there's a elementary school there, and you got the private Christian school there. Have we looked at the kids walking down the street, the traffic, also the school bus routes? Again, this is my first time ever
School bus.
doing it.
Yeah, school bus. So the school system has been in contact with the petitioner, and they're either in discussions or they determine where the school bus stops will be within the subdivision. They have requested some radiuses at the entrances and around curbs so they can get the school buses in and out fairly well. The development itself would have a sidewalk along 100 North, so it would accommodate pedestrian traffic should the children choose to walk to school.
And I understand this is your first time, but the question before the board today is whether or not they're allowed to have just one entrance into the neighborhood as opposed to,
I apologize again. It's
That's
my first
okay.
time being here. I just got notes.
I understand.
travel
So
for
it's, so
work,
you're,
work
so
for
you're,
government, and
right,
just
so
got
the
home.
comments need to be related to that
So
question
it's
before
just
the,
on that one question about the egress and.
that's why
egress.
we're here tonight, yes.
So since it's being one ingress and egress, isn't that going to cause a heavy traffic burden on 100 North, which is already pretty heavily burdened?
It'll be normal
The-
traffic. Yeah, I mean,
You're
we
having
don't,
61 houses.
we didn't do the
How's it gonna be more
threshold
normal
for
traffic?
a traffic study would have been 150 units. This doesn't meet the threshold for us to conduct a traffic study on it. I mean, we monitor traffic along our major arterials, and then we program improvements into it as we hit some thresholds. But yeah, I mean,
So in other words, no.
no,
right.
no, I mean, that's what Public Works does. Did they do it? Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak as to this agenda item?
Sorry, there wasn't an agenda up there when I signed in. Clark Brady, 7539 Meadow Violet Court, in Forest Commons, just across the street. I would like the Planning Commission Board to deny the waiver, and you have a very simple recourse, and that's to require that the lots be sized so that there's 49. It will fall within the regulation, and you don't have to worry about this. Secondarily, I'd like to request that you eliminate the stub road. It's not on the plan, it's not a stub, it's connected to her driveway. And I would like you to just change that, either by changing you could leave a stub there, just don't pave it. Right now, it's shown on the plan as being paved. So just change that to the same dimension as in the opposite side of the plan. I don't know if you have a copy of if you want to show that plan. So if you just put like a cul-de-sac area, you could have access and not have the stub road. So you would totally eliminate the need to have that turnaround point. You could just build that turnaround point in. I think there's a couple ways that you could eliminate that contention. You don't need to have, and the best solution for me would be to eliminate and make that 49 lots or 50 lots, whatever would fall within one entrance. Forest Commons has the exact same problem, and it's been a long time since that subdivision was put there. There have been a couple other opportunities that could have made a thoroughfare over the course of the last 20 years. There have been 2 or 3 times where there have been emergencies that occur in the first few homes of the addition in Forest Commons, and they prevented for a little while access to the rest of the properties. But that's my comment.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? I see a hand over here. And please remember that the reason we're here tonight is to discuss the waiver request to allow one entrance into the neighborhood as opposed to 2 that is required by ordinance.
Good evening. My name is Donna Stevens, 1028 Forest Commons Drive in Forest Commons neighborhood. To not repeat any of the things that have been asked, one of my primary concerns, and our neighbors too, is the position of the entrance that they've got coming out of this new addition, and the position of our entrance and exit, which we do have a boulevard exit, as someone had said. If you get all of those coming out in that same place, and they do need to have some kind of a, I don't know, survey on the traffic, because the traffic, I've been there for many, many years, and the traffic is really heavy. We have to sit there a long time just to get out of Forest Commons in the area that we have with the boulevard type of exit and entrance. So I would request to deny the waiver too, or to do something about the placement of that easement where you're going to go in and out.
Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead. Thank you. This will be the last public comment.
Hi, Vanessa Smith, 7648 Buttercup Court, Avon, Indiana. I too live in Forest Commons, and my petition is quite similar to Donna's, but I wanted to add some actual information. When you put this entrance, this one and only entrance right across from North Forest Commons, I can tell you, because I take my grandson to school every day, that I plan that I will have to wait at least 5 minutes to be able to turn out of my neighborhood in the mornings. And you're talking about adding another 100 cars that will also be trying to get out of the neighborhood about the same time in the morning. When somebody was talking about school, and I realized that we're talking about the access, but kids cannot walk. My grandson would love to walk to school, but since we're on the north side, the only way he can get to his school is to cross at that roundabout at 8 o'clock or at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, where traffic is backed up. And it takes me 5 minutes to get out of my neighborhood and then another 5 minutes sitting in traffic to get to the roundabout to go on to school. And you're talking about adding now another 100 cars. That's craziness. The other thing is if you did, in fact, if Kingsway decides to go ahead and sell that other road, the rest of that ground where the football field is, you said you were out there, so you understand. Where your next access road is going to come out is going to be right across from the driveway to Sycamore, to the school. And so now you're putting these people, you're putting more people and more cars either in front of another neighborhood or a school. And I will tell you a personal anecdote. We have a very good friend who, it's been 15 years now, was out jogging along the road, was hit by a car, and they could not get, because of the traffic, could not get to the EMTs could not get to her in a timely fashion because of all the traffic on that road. And now you want to add more cars. And so I would strongly, strongly, strongly urge you to please not grant this variance. There's a whole lot more I could tell you about, but since our time is short, I won't. But thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate that. That being said, we are now closing public comment on this agenda item. Discussion. And I would like to, Dan, if you could just remind everyone present here what our obligation is here today and what our choices are here today with regards to whether or not we grant this waiver. I think Robert may have asked it again, but just to remind everybody present what the rules are that we have to abide by.
It's a plat case, which means that your preliminary review is to determine whether the lots as drawn and the other elements of the plat itself comply with your ordinance. There is a request for a waiver in this case, which is a second item. And so with regard to the waiver, you are to apply the criteria for waiver. It's a discretionary review on the waiver, however. And you have to deal with that first in order to either vote to accept that waiver or not. And then you vote on the plat case. If the plat complies, you must approve. If the plat doesn't comply, then you deny.
Discussion.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Taylor, but without the waiver, the plat, well, maybe this is more of a Mr. Peoples question. Without the waiver, this would not meet our ordinances, correct?
Correct, yeah. I mean, if the waiver is denied, then the proposal as it is too dense. They would have to lose, 11 lots.
This is just, I think I'm going to ask a bit of a question, but to kind of answer some of our residents' questions. So because of what we're here, what this is a major plot amendment or proposal, excuse me. Issues such as easements, traffic, drainage issues, or market value of surrounding properties, are they to be, is that a factor that we should be considering in a major plot?
It's not a standard in any of our ordinances. It's not a standard that we review as part of the ordinances. And Greg did remind me, for some reason, I thought this was, we did do a traffic impact study review on this one. So yeah, we did look at the traffic on this particular one. I had totally forgotten about that. I thought it was part of a different one. But when we do traffic impact study reviews, we're just looking at managing the entrances or creating lane lengths, and Greg can talk more about it than I can probably.
Another way I'm trying,
But
there are
as far
important
as
issues, but
property
the stage that
value
we're
or-
at, they're
no.
not relevant to.
Existing drainage problems, no, we wouldn't do that. Now, when a property is developed, typically the drainage gets better, but it may not accommodate existing drainage problem, may not clear up existing drainage problems.
If I may, specifically with regards to drainage, so under the purview of the Plan Commission, you don't approve the drainage, obviously, that's under the Stormwater Board. So there are some criteria that I look at on behalf of the Department of Public Works and the Stormwater Board for preliminary drainage approval. If you remember on the agenda, there was a case that was continued for drainage reasons. They didn't meet any of the preliminary, what in the Stormwater Management Ordinance, Chapter 6, there's 4 criteria specifically that we look at in the primary plat stage, and that's the existing and proposed runoff, existing and proposed curve numbers, existing and proposed time of concentration, and then any upstream, downstream restrictions. We want to make sure that the developer is identifying where the drainage goes and that they are accommodating adequate facilities on the site. And then in the detailed construction drawings, which comes in the MAPF stage, they really get into the weeds. And then as far as the traffic, Crossroad doesn't review the traffic, and I would defer to DPW directly on that. But there are some criteria that, if not met from a drainage standpoint, we would request a continuance.
We wouldn't be here.
Correct. And that first case was not here. So this one, they met the minimum standards, and then Lance identified that we have some conversations ongoing that we're going to hash out in the detailed design and secondary plan.
Thanks, Greg.
I was just going to add on that this case, this is zoned R2. This wasn't a rezone. The owner of this land is entitled to come in and develop it at R2. And, the first step in them doing that is to present to you a plat, which again, they know that as long as they meet the requirements of our subdivision ordinance, it will be approved. And the law says that we have to put all of our standards, all of our concrete standards in our UDO, used to be our subdivision control ordinance, so that developers know what they would have to do. And so that's why this is, your look at a map, a plat, which lays out the lots, is your job tonight. In a rezone case, you guys talk about all kinds of different issues. You talk about fair market value of the homes. In a plat case, you never talk about that. It's not the time where that is heard. But if somebody has an entitlement, somebody has a right to, it's R2, we're going to develop an R2, that's their right. And same way with their plat. If they can put a plat in front of you that meets your ordinance, then they get approval. Now, because you have a waiver, I think the question you have to ask you is, well, what is better? Is it better to have 2 access points, or is it better to redesign it? But I think that, again, from the town standpoint, what the staff's position has been, consulted with Public Works, 1 access point is fine, is their position. You don't have to agree with that, but that's their position. But a lot of the issues that people are concerned about are really not within our purview tonight. And it's just the way that it's, because there are property rights involved, and the state legislature says how this works, and that's how it works.
And our UDO is available at our website, correct? So anybody who wants to take a look at our ordinances that would apply to any of this or to any of the statutes, that is all publicly available information. We always believe we believe our community is actively involved, and we like it that way. So we want you to have as much information as possible. Any further discussion about this?
So, Mr. Taylor, based on what you just said, we can turn down the waiver of 60 because it's got 60 lots, but if we turn it down, he can come back and still build there, but he could only build 49 lots. Is that correct?
Or they're going to propose 2 access points because that's what your ordinance requires. And that will produce however many lots it produces.
But we don't have enough.
For instance, they could plat a right of way through the existing Kingsway, Dan Jones Road, and build that street. Probably get more than 60.
Say that again.
They could theoretically plat a right of way from that stub street that they propose all the way to Dan Jones Road and then maybe get more than 60 because they could on 2 access points. I believe it's 100 lots.
And there's 12 acres that Kingsway has that is it's right now just sitting there doing nothing that in theory could be acquired.
Yeah, I mean, there is a way to do it. I mean, the option, if you deny the waiver, then they could extend that stub street all the way to Dan Jones Road, give you 2 access points, and then increase the density of the development.
Which then comes to the next question. And my 2 issues is this lady's easement, the cul-de-sac, and the stub street.
Yeah, I'll try to make that more simple. The developer has no right to go beyond their property line. And so the lady who came forward has property rights. They're granted her in that easement. I've not seen the easement. It doesn't really involve the town, but she has rights. The developer is going to not develop over their line. And again, I would assume the developer will work out any issues with them, but they won't connect in theory because there's a property line there. And we say, well, look, we don't know what your property rights are. We're not going to get involved with that. We are looking at a plat which isn't on your land. And
You can say that they don't, but the plan
Sir,
shows that they
sir,
would.
the time for public comment is open. It has been closed, so this is strictly discussion with the commission.
I mean, they each have their property rights and they have to resolve those, and we don't get involved in that. We just don't get involved in that ever. I mean, that's their issue.
Can the petitioner address that then? I don't want to make an assumption because if I do that, I'll be wrong.
Petitioner has 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Sure. Joel Trewartha with Ryan Homes, 8425 Woodfield Crossing, Indianapolis. In regards to the easement, we've actually been trying to reach out to Ms. Kilborn for some time. So we just traded contact info and we'll get a meeting scheduled to figure out her easement. But we've designed 2 different ways around her easement that we think can work for the both of us. One of those is maintaining her existing easement in gravel drive. So I don't see an impact if that's her desire on the gravel driveway. In regards to extending over to Dan Jones, I have no rights to the rest of the Kingsway property. So I can't speak to that right now. I'm just in contract on these 60 lots.
So talk about your stub street then. What's it going to look like? Can you make it a cul-de-sac?
Her ingress egress is granted from Kingsway to their house. So if the next property, or if they want to sell that 12 acres, that's going to still stay there, that ingress egress, which gives her the right. So if you can imagine a subdivision or whatever, that ingress easement would come through there. Our hope was that we could work with her to allow her to use a public right of way so that it's asphalt and the snow is gone and that kind of stuff. We were still trying to, like I said, trying to set up meetings with her on that. Could there's do other stuff? Yes. The reason the stub is there is part of trying to get a different access in case, because we can't go to the south because it's all woods. We can't go to the west. We did a traffic study. The traffic study told us to line up with Forest Commons and not put 2 out there and cause even more traffic and meandering of the traffic. So then we have to put a stubway somewhere to the east, wherever that goes. Now, because she owns the length of it, it's just a matter of where we put that. We could have done a turn and had another stub, but you're still, per the ordinances, we have to have some type of a stub. The hammerhead is part of where the fire wanted to turn around. An apparatus wants to turn around for some reason. It's a safety thing. I don't know if you guys have anything in your ordinance that allows an X amount of distance not to stub, but the sizes of the lots, I think we're like 150 some feet away from that. So let's say we were 50 feet away, then you wouldn't have to have a stub.
Dan, if the waiver was granted, would they still need to put in the stub? Would there be a necessity to put in the stub?
Well, your ordinance requires a stub.
Even with the waiver?
Yeah, even with two different issues.
Okay.
Two different issues, because the stub is not access. Because it doesn't have access to a road.
But isn't the point of the stub to give two access points? Potential future access points. But if we're granting the waiver to only allow one access point using a boulevard entrance, then doesn't that defeat the purpose of having the stub, or does it just not matter because of the way the ordinance is written?
Yeah, there are two different issues. The stub requirement goes to the connectivity policy of the town to say that wherever we can, we want to allow for connectivity in the future if that land to the east ever develops. That has long been the policy of the town for at least 20 years because things get built at different times. And again, if a developer did want to connect a future road to that stub, they would have to deal with any easement rights, but that's what that's designed for. That's a different issue altogether than the emergency access and the purposes of a second access.
So the stub is about connectivity to that 12 acres that is currently undeveloped in the future. It really isn't related to the double entrance, is what you're saying?
Correct. Now, again, but in making their waiver to get away from two access points, the developer is saying, well, we have another way in and we'll see what we can work out with the person who controls that drive. That's smart on their part. But again, I think that we have to remember that the reason for the stub is that we required them to stub it.
Okay.
We've required every development, and now many of them are connected, but that's the reason for that.
Okay. Did you have anything further to say for your rebuttal?
Yeah. The only, just to ease everybody's mind, would be the value of the homes. This community will comp very closely to our Whitmore Place subdivision, just up 267, actually zoned in Plainfield, but Avon schools. And those average sales prices are right around 500,000 as we sit today, and costs are only going up. So I understand that's not necessarily part of this approval, but to ease everybody's mind, that's, our ballpark.
And thank you for reaching out and connecting with the homeowner. We
Yep,
appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I still have one question. I just want confirmation. I'm fine with the stub street. Is it going to be blocked? Because I can see what's going to happen. People are going to see this gravel road and they're going to take this woman's gravel road, which I was on today, and it's got potholes in it. You need to fix your gravel road for me. Okay. No. They're going to use that gravel road to get up here to the south end of the subdivision and cut through to get to that. So it's going to become an egress ingress, even though it's a stub road. So if you tell me we're putting a stub road there, but we're putting a fence up or a barricade up or something.
I'm happy to, as long as public safety is okay with that. And it's
We'll
going to
put a gate that can be locked and open for public safety with a knock box then.
Bill, can we do bollards? Can we do something?
Okay.
That was the rebuttal time.
Thank you.
Yeah, the issue with the stub street is my thing back up there.
Thank you for
This
your
is going to
rebuttal.
sound silly. Essentially, those two lots right there. So something happens in this lot right here, and an engine or an aerial truck needs to service this area. The fire department doesn't like backing that vehicle up. And so what they typically do is on a stub street, either put a temporary cul-de-sac bulb, which is huge, or put a little hammerhead in there to allow that engine, or even a bus, although a bus wouldn't do it, but the engine or the aerial to go in there, do a 3-point turn and come back and drive forward. They have trouble backing those implements up, especially on neighborhood streets like this. So that's the reason we typically put a hammerhead at the end of a cul-de-sac like this now, to allow the fire trucks the opportunity to turn around rather than back up. And that's why they're asking about, we're fine, they're fine with it. They would be fine with putting probably your standard barrier at the end of that cul-de-sac and no one can leave there. They're just concerned that the fire department is going to say, no, you can't do that. We want a hammerhead turn there. And that's why the developer can't make that commitment at this time.
Can I add one thing?
Your rebuttal time is up. If you could just make it very quick.
Yes. The stub out and the hammerhead, if we can work with her that she doesn't have to go that from the top of that up, we can solve the whole problem. She can be on public thing. We can have her access and stuff come up. We can have the hammerhead for the department and everybody will be okay. That's the whole, in my opinion, that's the crux of the whole thing, is if we can work with her to use our entrance or any other thing to the other way from that point forward.
She's going to want to maintain
Would that be
a gravel
appropriate
road.
for a commitment, Mr. Taylor?
She's going to want to maintain her gravel road. She said she's come in twice and said she doesn't want to give up her gravel road. So
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion with the board?
I'm not sure who this is. Maybe this is Mr. Peoples' question. Maybe it's been asked before, but I just want to clarify. If this map would have had only 49 lots in it, I don't think we would have had this much discussion or concern about this. This would essentially be out of our hands at this point. Is that correct? Understood. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Do we hear a motion? Anybody want to make a motion on this?
I move that we deny the waiver of section 7.21.j of the UDO to allow a subdivision of 60 lots with one access point to a perimeter street.
If you guys are of the mindset to deny, we'd like to
Now's not the
request a
time.
continuance to address the comments of the neighbors.
This is your board.
I'm a little concerned that you waited until we are coming up for the motion before you asked for a continuance. We've been discussing this for a good half an hour now. And I announced at the beginning that if you wanted a continuance because of our minimum quorum, that you should have asked for it then.
And I understand that. I guess it has to do more with the adjacent easement and getting that figured out so we can keep Ms. Kilborn happy as well as, get to the one or two access points with staff and figure out a reasonable solution.
Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, with that would have nothing to do with this waiver. Is that correct?
What's that?
His easement, the easement issues that he just brought up.
It's separate entrance, a separate,
Completely separate issues.
Yeah,
So
separate
the
issue.
motion on the table is to deny the waiver with no relevance. There's my argument.
I believe in following the rules.
would
Mr.
second
Taylor,
the
can you
motion
give
on
me
the
some,
floor.
some guidance here? Is there any rules that I can refer to that?
You're not required to consider a motion to continue at this late in the process, but the commission may. So it's completely your discretion to do so.
Oh, thanks.
That's what you're allowed to do.
thoughts, Mr. Zuzen?
I'm willing to continue it if they want. It's up to everybody else. Otherwise, I'm ready to
Harold?
act on the motion.
I think we should act on the motion.
We're moving forward with the motion,
And you still need a second.
and we still need a second. Can you repeat your motion, Robert?
Sure. I move that we deny the waiver of section 7.21.j of the UDO to allow a subdivision of 60 lots with one access point to a perimeter street.
Do we have a second to deny the waiver request?
Second.
Four.
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 Okay.
Now you
Fun.
still need to take a vote on the plat, even though you're now in a non-compliance, you'd still need another motion.
Okay.
Are you willing to accept a motion at this
Yes.
time on that? Then I move that we deny MAP 22-1.
Hold on a second.
I was just going to ask for clarification. Can we continue the plat to revise the plat, but modify the waiver request?
Again, since the public hearing has been conducted, it's at the discretion of the plan commission. You don't have a right to have a continuance at this stage. It's up to the commission.
I don't object to a request for continuance of this since you were doing it at the beginning of the discussion. Are you formally requesting a continuance of this agenda item?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please.
I'll make a motion to that. I make a motion that we continue MAP 22-16 Countryside Estates preliminary plat to allow the developer to redesign this plat to comply with our ordinances.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Harold Heiser. Robert Pope.
Four.
Catherine Ransberg.
Four.
Greg Zuzen.
Four.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you.
Just for clarification, is the continuance to your next meeting? And
Yes.
is that what you want? Is that what you intended to ask for until the November meeting?
Yeah, 30 days, and then if we need more time, we'll request a formal.
Okay, just to be clear.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Next agenda item, Ellis Minor plat.
All right, this is MAP 2202 Ellis Minor, request approval of a minor plat to subdivide 46 acres into 3 lots for single-family residential development with a waiver of section 7.19 of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow for this minor subdivision to be constructed without providing concrete sidewalks and/or asphalt side trails in accordance with the Avon bicycle and pedestrian plan. 46-acre property zoned AG and is located at 2950 South County Road 625 East. This is the location down in the southwest part of the town. It's got a single-family dwelling on it, and the proposal will be to subdivide this up into an additional 2 lots for single-family residential construction or the issuance of 2 more building permits to allow for 2 more houses to be constructed down there. The request does include a waiver of section 7.19 of the Unified Development Ordinance. That section requires for pedestrian facilities to be constructed. A waiver would let them not construct sidewalks and trails. There are no sidewalks or trails along any of the county roads and streets in this area of the town. It's a fairly rural area, but we ultimately do defer to the Department of Public Works on this waiver request. I know there have been ongoing discussions with the petitioner on this about possible financial contribution to the sidewalk and trail infrastructure fund in lieu of constructing sidewalks. And I know the Public Works Director and the petitioner have been talking on those things. And with that, with that contribution, they have indicated support for the waiver, provided that a donation be made to the Sidewalk and Trail Infrastructure Fund to cover the cost of constructing the trails in the future should development occur in this rural area of the town, and sidewalks and trails need to be constructed. This is a layout of the three lots. This is the existing lot. Well, obviously this is the house on it. I believe the existing house would be on this lot, and this lot, and this lot right here would be for future development for homes. We do recommend approval of the waiver subject to a condition, that condition being the donation to the Sidewalk and Trail Infrastructure Fund shall be completed in an amount consistent with the grading and construction of the appropriate pedestrian infrastructure prior to the recording of the final plat. And staff recommends approval of MIP 2202 Ellis Minor with the following conditions. And two of them are the standard conditions that we have, and then there's of course the one that the property owner shall be required to coordinate with the Department of Public Works on a restrictive donation for a sidewalk/trail waiver. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So this is for 3 residential lots, is that correct?
Yeah, it's 3 residential lots. 1 existing house is on the existing lot right now, so it'd be 2 new houses.
I'm fine with the waiver request. How do we determine this monetary value to these, to the sidewalk trail fund? I've got our fund balances here. Is that the infrastructure contribution? Is that where that goes?
It's a new fund.
I'm sorry?
Ryan's probably going to come to you for creating that fund.
Okay, so how do you calculate that value, that dollar amount? That's my question.
Engineer estimates, and that's what the petitioner's representative and the director of the Department of Public Works have been discussing.
Well, this will be a good question for Dale, because we had one about this 2 months ago. So I'll bring it up at that time then.
I did, just so you know, there were 2 letters that were submitted prior to us getting the packet out to you, and so I put those on your desks. They were in support of the waiver request.
I think, Greg, what you were just talking about is we had something similar not long ago, similar situation. Northwest side of the community, bit more rural, so not necessarily in an immediate need for complying with our thoroughfare plan. However, they probably not the right word, contributed to this sidewalk plan fund for a future development to help build that cost. I feel like this is almost the exact same situation. We've got a more rural area. Hear me out. I want sidewalks completely throughout my community. It just makes for easier people movement, safer people movement. But again, this being rural, it's not really necessary at this time. With their contribution to that fund, I feel like they're meeting the spirit. They're preparing for that eventual day when this might turn into a more dense community, and so therefore needs this pedestrian traffic. I feel like I'm there with you that as far as this waiver is concerned, I think they're meeting the spirit and the intent that we're attempting here.
I agree, and I like the idea that it's just reinforcing that we are a community and we are interconnected. This will eventually, I'm sure, be developed, and being part of that is helpful to everybody, creates an investment. Any further questions for staff? Okay, ask the petitioner to come forward.
Good evening. I'm Dale Cruz, Cruz Consulting, 7384 Business Center Drive in Avon. And I'm here this evening on behalf of Josh and Kelly Ellis. They're sitting here in the front row. They are the owners of this property and also are desiring to divide this property into 3 lots. And I think we'll just get right down to it, your question about establishing the value and how do we do that. And so what we did was Ryan sent me a schedule of values for bonding, which are values for all kinds of things in the town: storm sewers, sanitary sewers, streets. And one of them is asphalt path. And so what I did was I applied the value that's in that chart to the amount of square yards that they would have on their property and came up with a value. And that value equates to $108,000. They have a lot of road frontage. They have about 3,300 feet of road frontage because they have frontage on 300 South, they have frontage on 625, and they have frontage on 251 South. So they have a lot of frontage, and therefore their square footage value is large, and therefore their contribution amount at $30 a square yard is large at $108,000. But I think it's also important to consider or understand that, remove that the other thing they're doing here is that they're dedicating the right of way that would be needed to build the path. So when the path is going to be built, when and if this path is ever built, the right of way will have been dedicated as part of this plat. They dedicate right of way on 50 feet of right of way on 625. They dedicate 60 feet of right of way on 300 South, and they dedicate the same 50 feet on part of 251 where it makes the jog. And then their property goes a little bit west of 625 also, so that right of way is a little bit narrower. But they're dedicating the necessary right of way as part of the platting process. And there's a value to that ground, and it's substantial, and they're giving it. So I feel like between the two values, they, to use your phrase, I believe they've met the spirit of the ordinance, and we would respectfully ask for your approval of the waiver. And the subdivision.
Did we do the same thing up at 200 North, that one that you represented them on?
We didn't. We, on that particular one, that's a good question. On that particular one, there was no monetary contribution made. The agreement at that meeting was that if a sidewalk ever touched the plat from either side, then the owners within the plat would have to build the sidewalk.
I remember that.
And that's how that one was approved. The right-of-way was dedicated, again, and the right-of-way was dedicated for the sidewalk to be there. But the only stipulation was that if it ever hit on either side, it would be constructed at the landowner's expense. So it's a little different.
Should we do that here?
What do you think, Bill?
Is that something we should consider at this point?
I'm just trying to be consistent.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do.
Well,
How does that get translated into the minutes?
the Public Works Director prefers this process. I mean, there have been discussions concerning that very thing. And it's his sidewalk, and that's why we defer to the Public Works Director on this one.
Well, if it was a sidewalk, it would be less square footage, right? That calculation would be less than the 108.
Oh, yeah.
Because you did this as a trail.
Right. Correct.
What if we did it as a sidewalk?
It would be less square footage, obviously.
Okay, I'm sorry, Bill.
Oh, no problem. It's just, there's been internal discussions between planning and public works, and it's a public works infrastructure project. And so that's the reason planning defers to the Public Works Director. We had thought that one on 200 North was a good compromise when we did that one, and the Public Works Director disagreed, which is the reason why we've phrased this condition the way it is.
Well, and I'm fine with that, but I think we need to understand what we want to do before we tell somebody else what we expect them to do.
I agree.
So.
If I may, I'm Josh Ellis. I'm the property owner. When we entered into this deal, do I need to say 2950 South County Road 625? When we entered into this deal, we sat down and we were under the understanding that it was a 3-foot sidewalk path. And we did the math ourselves, and it was $35,000. And when we started to get farther into this process, we then were told, no, it's a 10-foot path. And that's when the numbers ballooned. So I just want to provide that information up front. We did sit down with Bill. We did know that this was part of it. And we did look and seek out for, okay, how much do we need to set aside for this? Because we do love the idea of developing the sidewalk plan for Avon. We've lived here for 15 years now. So I just wanted to add that real quick as we're throwing that in.
So you would be comfortable in contributing $35,000?
Yes, we would.
Question for Bill there. Set the waiver aside for the moment. Does this meet staff's interpretations of our UDO?
Oh,
for
yeah,
this
it's, I
subdivision?
mean, the lots are
The only-
well beyond the size that, and plenty of street frontage for each of the lots. Yeah, it's, I mean, this is,
So to clarify, the only concern that we have is the adherence to the bicycle and pedestrian plan.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Do we want to entertain a motion?
We need public comment?
Oh, I guess we need to do that, don't we? Is there anybody who would like to make a who would like to speak publicly on this agenda item?
I like that question. I live on 251 South.
Sir, is that who you called?
Why don't
Okay.
you take the
Whoever-
microphone back to that gentleman? It'd be easier for him.
Sit down, sit. It's okay, it's okay. Can you, camera? All right, think about that. Go ahead, take a seat.
Okay, Ralph Landwerland, 2821 625E, Plainfield is our mailing address. And on the thing, we're concerned about dividing the 3 lots. Right now, according to this, 625E is right here, 300 South is right here, 251 is right here. 625E comes off of 300 at a curve, and there's a house right there on the corner. It goes up there and makes a quick S-turn at 251, which goes into Cedar Bend, all right? There's a field on the other side. Half of this is woods. And their property takes in 8 acres of the 41 3/4 acre for the whole property before it's divided, okay? When they divide it, one of them is 16 acres, 0.15, and 17 acres, 5.1. Their proposal is 1 house on each one of those plots. But we're concerned about the next person who buys that property, because right now the gas company just did a fault locate to put in a new gas line on 625E buried, which will be bigger, and it would accommodate a developer for, if he bought both properties, he would have 33.5 acres approximately to develop. So we're concerned right now is also the traffic, because when you come off of 300, you take a little curve and makes that 251 S curve. And people on 251 have a hard time because the traffic is at certain times is backed up in front of their property, the Ellis's, because they're waiting for, it's an offsetted on 300, an offset 4 stops, 4-way stop, and it backs up the traffic, and everybody in town is using 300 for an alternate route to go off of 40 so they can get over to Vesta Road and back that way to get to 40. So we're concerned also about the traffic If a developer comes in, and that, I know this is part of the sidewalk deal, there's not that many people that walks that road because it's dangerous. And they would walk on the 625E sign where there's about, I would say, 30 feet of grass. And people could walk that way, but we don't have that many people. It's the traffic if a developer goes in and that, because people have a hard time getting off of 251 and they go downhill on 300, and the back of their 8 acres is that field, which is part of that plot on the west side. And then there's another farmland or two, and then we got the French Lick Creek. Also on 625, about the 5th or 6th house from 300, there's an underground water drain for runoff water that goes into the woods to one of the natural drains that's in there. I know a bulldozer can reroute and all that. And to do that, you would have to cut down all the trees. We have a lot of wildlife, deers, possum, raccoons, chipmunks. We got birds galore that's in that, and we're afraid we'll disrupt their habitat. And when Clutters had it, he was trying to get the woods and the 2 ag fields designated as a habitat for animals.
Sir, can you stick to the question that is before the commission? And we do have limited time.
Do what?
Just kind of asking you to wrap it up a little bit.
Oh, okay. So basically, we're not agreeing with the subdividing of the all 3 lots. You know, we're not happy with it.
Thank
So
you.
that's it.
Was there anybody else who signed up? Ian? We have Robert.
Are you capable of walking?
I'm probably the oldest person in this room. It's harder every day. I'm concerned, I got a concern about.
Could you state your name and address, sir?
Okay, my name's Roy Crawford. I live at 6283 East County Road 251 South. It's right at the end of 251 South. It's dead end. We have about 40 acres there, borders the creek and so forth. And we've got 56 horses down there. So probably the largest horse owner in Hendricks County now since they've closed a lot of them. But anyway, get to the point. I don't know what they're good putting in. I'm not yay or nay. I don't know. Is there any place I can get something that I can look at a schematic or verbiage that tells me, hey, this is what, I know it's going to be 2
Sir, could you speak into the microphone, please?
Speaking to you? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
But I just want something I can read and make a decision on. Am I for it or not? And this pathway, okay.
That's the layout of
All right. Okay. This trail. Sounds like a good idea. They're putting a lot of trails in everywhere in the whole county. They're good. They're good for people to walk. But who maintains that trail once it's in? Is there anything?
Town would.
The town would?
Mhm.
So it would be the town's property.
Well, it'd be the town's trail, yeah.
They would maintain it like they would stormwater. They come out,
Sidewalks,
they-
streets, yeah.
what-
Sidewalks and
what it
streets, same
takes.
thing.
Okay, just, I'm looking for some information. I guess I got some here. I don't want to say, that's what I want to see, because it's a nice area back there. I hate like hell to see it blossom into a lot of, we call them monopoly homes, like you see a lot of subdivisions around. We call them monopoly homes, but every one of them looks exactly the goddamn same, you know. I don't want to see that for that property. That's pretty property, okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else signed up to speak? Nobody else? Is there anybody else present who'd like to speak on this agenda item? Nobody else stepping forward. I declare public hearing on this agenda item closed. Discussion.
Petitioner does get 5 minutes of rebuttal if he wants it.
So I think the important thing is to consider or remember that it is 3 lots. One is 16 acres approximately, one is 17 acres approximately, and then approximately 8 acres with the existing home on it. And if then anybody else would want to divide the properties into more lots, then they'd be back here asking for your approval to do that. So this petition is for 3 lots. And we've already talked about the sidewalk waiver and where we're at with that, so I'm not going to rehash that.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Did you have anything else?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. I think as Dan has pointed out, this touches on the question of property rights. A property owner has the right to choose to develop or subdivide or seek to choose or to develop or subdivide a property. That's part of the right you have as a property owner. What's going to happen in the future, we don't have any control over. They're not putting it into trust, to the best of my knowledge, so it's really not something that we should consider today. I think the idea of turning this into 3 large parcel lots is an attractive idea. I think it's a great way. I would personally like to see 3 large estate-sized homes there, but I suspect there may be other people that have other ideas, but I don't see, I believe Robert already asked the question, this petition meets all the requirements, correct, Bill?
It's all, so the property is zoned ag, and so it meets all the requirements of the AG zoning district. And there's no overlays or anything out here. At least none related to plating.
My only last question then is, do we currently have a sidewalk and trail infrastructure fund?
In my discussions with the town manager, we don't. We do have a tree mitigation fund, which we've had some restrictive donations to that. But we haven't had the need to create the trail and sidewalk fund. And so we haven't, but I believe the town manager is going to introduce that to the county or council in the near future.
So if I make a motion, can I put a dollar amount in with that donation then?
Yes.
If there's no other questions, I'm prepared to make a motion.
I got one more question. This might be a question. Is the dedicated right of way to be included in the or is that part of our process?
That's a standard, that's a requirement of the ordinance.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we approve MIP 22-01 Ellis Minor Plant of the section 7.19 of the Unified Development
We need to
Ordinance.
grant the waiver first.
We need to do the waiver.
Isn't that what that is, the waiver?
Yeah, this should have the waiver. That's my fault.
Once again, so they can hear you in the back.
That's all right. For the record, that was not my mistake. Let's start over here. I make a motion to approve MIP 22-01 Ellis Minor Plat, the waiver of section 7.19 of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow a minor subdivision without providing concrete sidewalks and asphalt side trails in accordance with the Avon Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, subject to the following conditions. A donation in the amount of $35,000 to the Sidewalk and Trail Infrastructure Fund shall be completed in an amount consistent with grading and construction of the appropriate pedestrian infrastructure prior to the recording of the plat.
Do you have a second?
Might I recommend you remove that dollar amount? that would allow some leeway for staff to determine an amount that's commensurate with the amount of sidewalk that might need to be created there. My understanding is that amount is closer to the range of 100 and we're getting ready to hear. You're shaking your head no, so now I'm looking at you. What am I doing?
I understood, well, what I understood Dale say was that sidewalk expense was about 35,000. Trail expense was 108. Is that, yeah. So Greg's motion really is to say that he wants the condition to be what the sidewalk would have cost, not the trail.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
I agree.
My misunderstanding. Thank you.
Well, and I just read it as it was printed here. If I can drop the verbiage of trail, just sidewalk infrastructure fund, because we don't have that fund established yet.
You want to try for a third time?
Whew. Let's just go to the donation of the $35,000 to the sidewalk infrastructure fund shall be completed in an amount consistent with grading and construction of the appropriate pedestrian infrastructure prior to the recording of the final plat.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Harold Iser.
Four.
Robert Boat.
4.
Catherine Ransford.
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
And now we move on to the approval of the plat. Do we want to discuss this further or entertain a motion?
I'd move that we approve MIP 22-01 Ellis Minor Plat, request for approval of a minor subdivision primary plat to subdivide 45.84 acres into 3 single-family lots, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, any revised plans must comply with all commitments and conditions noted as part of any approval granted. Number 2, the project receives any necessary review and approval by Crossroads Engineers on behalf of the town, the Hendricks County Surveyor and/or Drainage Board, and the Hendricks County Health Department for well and septic use. Number 3, the property owner shall be required to coordinate with the Department of Public Works on a restrictive donation for the sidewalk waiver. Number 4, the final plat will comply with all the relevant portions of the UDO and the town code.
Do we have a second?
Second that.
Second.
Harold Iser.
4.
Robert Pope.
4.
Catherine Ransford.
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Moving on, do we have any other business?
No.
Committee reports?
BZA had one appeal on their agenda, and that was the variance request for the lot line that you heard in regards to the Beechwood Center plat amendment, and that was approved unanimously.
Any other committee reports? Nope. Okay. Any other items for the good of the order? If not, meeting adjourned.